Hey, good afternoon. Dr. Alan Christensen here with you, and welcome to another installment for Office Hours Live. I am seeing people jump on already. That is so cool. Welcome aboard. I'm a couple minutes early, but that's not too unusual. So, yeah, good to see you all. Uh, as always, love to hear your detailed questions. Anything's fair game, but you'll get the best answers if it's about thyroid care, endocrinology, diet, weight, metabolism, those sorts of things. Those are my forte. And I love detailed questions, so don't be afraid to lay the detail on there. Oh, and if you ask one, hang out. I'll probably have some follow up questions for you as well. So, as usual, I got a few little points to cover in advance. Susie O'Malley, you look well. Thank you so much. Feeling really good. And I'll update a few things that way too. Yeah, and I'm with you guys on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube Live. So, any of those platforms are totally fine. Uh, let's see what's going on right now. Well, one big exciting thing is that I started my formal training. I was going to run the Boston Marathon. I qualified for that, kind of a lifelong dream. Didn't happen several times due to COVID, and then it didn't happen because I was hospitalized. It was like I was literally in the hospital when I was supposed to be there, and that was last fall from West Nile. And last few months, I wasn't sure how much recovery I would get out of the deal. It was a West Nile meningoencephalitis. Um, Somewhere around three quarters of people have lifelong neurological disability, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to walk properly or run. I am running, and I am able to take on another attempt to qualify for Boston. So I've got to qualify before I could go, and then I may be able to go if I qualify. So the qualifying attempt will be in June, and there's a 20-week training program which started today. So that kicked off, and I'm in good spirits and feeling really well from that. One workout down and 119 to go. So a couple of questions that were sent in advance. I'm going to cover these. Briefly, I'll also mention tomorrow I'm doing a free webinar on sleep, the relevance of sleep for those that are working with thyroid issues and that are trying to recover on those and how those things connect and ways you can sleep better. I'll talk about Thyrotonen, which is a pretty unique supplement. It's a version of melatonin that's not been on the market before, and this is part of thyroid-specific formulations. So I'll talk about that as well, but it'll be a broader discussion about sleep. This is a series of webinars about these new offerings, these new things that are available. So if you did sign up already, you will get information about this. If not, I'll get that link up here. Let me see if I can find this. Yeah, here it is. Here's a link for which you can sign up. These are free webinars, just educational stuff, and a lot of open windows here. Oh, here we go. This is what I need. Moving these things around. There we go. Okay. So there's the link. Sofman Joanne, happy you're going to run again, going to try and qualify again. Yeah, if I do qualify in June, that would be for the April 2023 Boston Marathon. It's been a long road and hope to get there one of these years. Not going to give up just yet. So along those lines, a question that I got a lot of really kind comments congratulating me and wishing me well for that. But a lot of people said, hey, I used to run, but I didn't want to wreck my knees. And I quit because I was afraid of having knee or hip problems. And, I've thought that through myself. Here I'm a guy in his mid 50s. Is this a smart use of my time? Am I going to create more problems for myself later on in life? And I've certainly known people who have been athletic and have had problems with their joints. So, and it seems very intuitive. If you're running, you're banging on your knees, you're squeezing that cartilage out, and you run out. That's kind of the general idea, and it seems really intuitive. Funny thing, my relatives, my parents, my aunts and uncles, my grandparents, boy, almost all of them have had bad arthritis. Many have had knees and hips done multiple times. And of them, I don't think any of them have run more than 2 steps since elementary school. So yeah, a lot of folks get knee problems and never run. But for sure, some athletic people do still get knee issues. I'm sharing an image right now. Those who are on Facebook and YouTube Live can see this. This is an image that's from the British Medical Journal. This was an infographic they put out a little over a year ago. And they were addressing exactly this concern. And they called it a myth, the myth about knee and hip problems from recreational running. And what they've shown is that if you are doing recreational endurance activities, running specifically, it's actually protective against both knee and hip osteoarthritis. Now, if you're a world-class competitor, if you're like someone who's been a professional and training at that level, you do have a slightly higher risk of joint issues later in life. So, what does that mean? Well, world class, literally, if you're like one of the Olympic participants at levels of distance runs of half marathons or greater, then you have slight increased risks. Now, if you've done no activity, your baseline risk, just from having knees and hips, your baseline risk of severe arthritis is about 10% for sedentary people. So if you're inactive and you're trying to save your joints, you got about a 1 in 10 chance of having that not work out and having the joints give you problems. If you've been a professional world-class athlete, that risk is higher. It's 13%. So rather than 10%, it's 13%. But amateur recreational athletes, even marathoners, their overall risk of knee or hip osteoarthritis is about 3.5%. So it's somewhere around 2.5 to 3 times lower, about 3 times lower than it is for the sedentary population. That's not to say nobody who runs is going to get a bad knee, but their odds would have been higher if they hadn't run. It would have likely happened to them anyway. So, yeah, so recreational physical activities are actually protective. And not only that, this paper talked about those who have existing osteoarthritis. They already have bad knees. They're still better off being more active than less active. They're not going to make things worse. They're only going to be helpful for their longer term prognosis. So, pretty cool stuff and rather counterintuitive for what a lot of us have thought. Many more jumping on. Welcome. Good to see you guys. I'm with you all on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube Live and Office Hours Live. I was just talking a bit about running and joints. Short answer is don't be afraid to exercise. You're not going to hurt yourself by moving. The risk of harm from inactivity is so much greater. And the numbers I shared was about threefold. So it's about 3 to 4 times less likely to get hip or knee osteoarthritis if you're running than if you're not. So yeah, the couches are always the biggest risk that we face. A couple more things have come in advance, and yeah, I'm also watching out for new questions coming in. I see one about exercise. I'll mention on that. I see one about glutathione here, and yeah, others coming in. And Crystal's with us. That's awesome. So, Crystal, I was about to get to your question next. Let me pull that one up right now. This is one that I've seen a lot, and this is totally germane to tomorrow's topic. I'm going to be talking about sleep tomorrow, and I was just updating the presentation and looking through some new medical research. And Crystal is doing the metabolism reset, and in that, I encourage really maximizing your sleep. Getting just more sleep than normal. I called it sleep binges or mini vacations even. There's a lot of connections between sleep and one's metabolism and body weight. Didn't do that very well. But the better you're doing on sleep, the more easy it will be to get to a good body weight and the more spontaneously that you will stay there. We just had Parathyroid Guru join us. That's really cool. Welcome aboard. Very important topic. So about sleep. So the question was, I can get more sleep. And do I wake at my normal time or allow my body to rest for the day? So in general, you're better off with more sleep, right? But I wanted to talk about the idea of social jet lag. That's why I wanted to pull this question up. So there's when we go to sleep and when we wake up. And this is a weird thing, but the human circadian rhythm is not on a 24-hour cycle. You would think it would be because that's about what the length of our day is, but it's not. So each morning when we get out and we get some sunlight, we reset our circadian cycle and we get it set to where it's back in alignment with the day. But if we don't get that regular light exposure, our schedule drifts. And they've done some pretty clever experiments. They've had people in caves and they've got like no windows and no cues of daylight and darkness, no clocks, and they let them stay awake when they wish and sleep when they wish, and they see how their schedule evolves. And their schedules evolve at greater than 24 hours, sometimes even like 25 to 30 hours. Now, the relevance of that is it's very easy for your body to reset your schedule forward, meaning it's very easy to stay up later and to sleep in later than you would normally. However, it's rather difficult to move your schedule backward. So when your schedule moves forward, there's not a cut and dry number because how long you sleep, how much it's changed. These are all variables that can take into account. But when your schedule moves forward for a few hours, usually it's going to take you about 3 to 5 days to go back to your old schedule if you change it again. So here's the pitfall that a lot of people fall into. You sleep in the weekend, right? You get more time where you can sleep longer and you get extra sleep on the weekend. Let me throw some numbers out. Let's say that during the weekdays you wake up at 6 and go off to work or school. And the weekends, well, you didn't want to get up that early, so the weekends you sleep in until 9. So what's happening is your body figures that 9 o'clock is wake up time. Forget that 6 o'clock business. The later time that you slept till becomes like the high water mark. That's when you figure morning is. Now, you'll get back to a rhythm eventually. That might be like Thursday or Friday, but this is a big part of why people struggle with Mondays is because they're completely off their schedule. They were not expecting to wake up that early. Their body got used to sleeping at waking up at 9, like very quickly. And so Monday morning, it's just like jet lag. It's just like you went from West Coast to East Coast. It's the exact same thing. So as the week rolls on, you start to adjust and you feel better. And, then, thank goodness it's Friday and all that. A lot of that is just social jet lag. So the message and the answer for Crystal is if you get a chance to sleep in, sleep is good, but really earlier, if you can stack more sleep earlier, it's going to be better for you overall than stacking it later on. Yeah, if there's one thing that's important to hold as constant as you can, it's what time you wake up. So there's what time you go to sleep, how long you sleep for, the timing of your meals, the timing of your light, the time you wake up. And of all of those, the one that I would encourage you to be the most consistent about is what time you wake up. Because when that one does change, everything else is thrown off and your body quickly adjusts to that later time. So, Crystal, in your exact case, if you've been way behind, you might be better off getting some more sleep rather than less. But overall, prioritize the stuff earlier in the day. Whatever happens, think about a time in which it's got to stop. There is a time you go to sleep, right? So whatever it is that we're doing, our activities and stuff, we eventually stop them. So we can. We just have to stop them earlier. There are some tricks when you're really used to being up later where you can reset that. And a couple of those I detailed pretty well in the adrenal reset diet. I'm also talking about a wake therapy protocol, which is online. There are ways you can reset a rhythm when it's really thrown off. But overall, if your wake up time stays consistent, then it's often a matter of just turning in a little bit earlier. So yeah, really good question. Let me grab, I saw a few things coming in. Let me grab a quick one or two of those here, perhaps. And then I got one more that was sent in advance. Let's see. Oh, here's one. She just said, I'll come back to that one. Let's see. Lots of really good questions here already. I thought I saw one about a comment that I made earlier. And I don't see the one I thought I saw. Okay, that's totally cool. I will get to this one more real quick that was sent in advance, and then I will dive into these new ones that are rolling in. So good to be with you guys. Here's the other one I've been seeing a lot, and that was here. So this is, there's a new daily reset bundle that's out as part of thyroid-specific formulations. And so the question is, I've been on the daily reset pack. Should I change? Do I have to change the daily reset bundle? So short answer is you don't have to change. We will keep the daily reset packs available. We have no plans to take those out of circulation at all. But I always like to update stuff. I'm always trying to think about how we could do things even a little bit better. And we update our phones, our apps, our software, and same thing with this. So I wanted to see, and I listen to your feedback. I always hear people say what they like, what they don't like, what they wish they could see. And I take that into account and I use that for new versions of things. So the feedback I've had quite a bit has been, love the reset pack. I wish there was fewer pills. Okay. I wish it wasn't twice a day. It is twice a day. There's, pack it twice, once in the morning and once at night. And when I talk to people, and they tell me about things and we start, getting a rapport and they're honest with me. They say, I don't get that second pack in hardly ever. I've heard that so many times. And it's formulated for 2 packs. So at 1 pack, you're only getting half of some of the things that you need. And the last thing that I've heard and I've also been thinking is many are avoiding high dose B vitamins. We're seeing this more and more. So it's common to see some of the water soluble B vitamins, thiamine, niacin, riboflavin, in amounts that are quite a ways above the RDA. And there are some arguments for that. There are some people that do better with that, not an unreasonable thing. There is more data arguing that some people don't do as well with that, and some would prefer to be closer to the RDA or at it and not greatly above that. And I've heard that, and I think that's quite reasonable. I think there's many that can probably do better without there being a lot of overage. So those are the big things I took into account. And what I wanted to do was make the reset pack more streamlined so we could bring down the pill count and keep the nutrients at full doses, but not be in high, not as far above for those that wish to not be as far above. So here's how those things compare. The bundle, there's 3 products in a bundle. The pack, there's 60 packets in the box. Now, I love the idea of the pack. I super love the idea of the pack. The reality is it requires a higher pill count and it totally changes the pricing. And I really want to give you, I hear people say too, they wish they could do it, but some say they couldn't afford certain things. And that always breaks my heart. So I also wanted to make things more accessible for people. So I had to step away from the pack for this, but do a bundle instead. But in doing so, I was very able to lower the pill count. So rather than so 8 total per day, I got it down to 5 in one dose. And also I was able to target all the nutrients and update them. So here's the key differences. The main thing is that there's some accessory phytonutrients in the Daily Reset pack. They're general things that can help the deiodinase pathways, and it's all fine. It's good stuff. In the Daily Reset bundle, I made these to complement all the thyroid-specific formulation products. So if you've got other goals like lowering your antibodies, shrinking nodules, helping your sleep, things like that, then do the other thing for that goal along with the bundle. So that's the thought process. You can meet those goals better and have it be more streamlined and targeted. So that's why I took out some of the accessory phytonutrients. And there were those that also wished to avoid them. They didn't want to have things that had broccoli extracts or whatnot. So I got this more targeted by doing so. So that's the big difference. And someone said, just tell me what you would recommend for your wife if she had Hashimoto's. Well, that would be the bundle. I would do that. It's just more streamlined. It's fewer pills. It's easier to be compliant with. And that's the idea. There's a lot of folks who are huge fans of the Daily Reset packs and don't want them to be radically different. And I respect that, and they'll be available. So that's the key differences there. Okay. So let me grab a few more of the new questions that have come in. I'm going to just scan really quickly to look at all the platforms. I'm going to grab one from Instagram real quick, and then I'll get a few from the other platforms as well. Kelly's been with us for quite a while, and I've seen her often. Welcome back, Kelly. Kelly said, just got her labs back. TSH and T4 are normal. T3 is high. Don't have any antibodies. Does this mean I'm now hyperthyroid or still hypothyroid? So, Kelly, if you can give some more detail, I will watch for that. So the T3 is high. Do you mean elevated above range or high normal? Another follow-up question would be, are you on thyroid medication? And if so, did you take your thyroid medication before the labs were done, and which one was it? Those are all factors that would allow me to give you a different answer. And if you can also put in exact numbers about your TSH especially, I can give you some really, really good detailed feedback on that. So Kelly, I wanted to get that out so you had time to catch that before you wandered off to do something else. And also wanted to see if you give me some more detailed answers. So are you on meds? Which ones? How was that timed? What was your exact TSH score? And the T3, above range, high range? What did you mean exactly that way? Okay. Yeah, let's grab a few more here. And I'll be on for probably about another half hour or so today. I will be doing a longer event tomorrow night and a few more things earlier tomorrow. So I'm going to be saving my voice for some of that. So here's a great one. This is from James in Raleigh. Best time to take vitamin D3 and vitamin K2 to sleep better. Yeah, James. So overall, these are good micronutrients. They have big effects upon your body's calcification, your immune response. A weird thing about vitamin D3, I won't go too deep on this, but I've touched on this in the past. It's a useful thing to understand. Some blood tests are skewed by being in some kind of a disease state or metabolic stress in general. Vitamin D is one of those. So it turns out that any source of inflammation can cause vitamin D levels to look lower than they are. And if you think this through, that's created almost like a mm, almost like a lot of data suggesting that vitamin D causes, or a lack of vitamin D causing problems that it's really just associated with. So inflammation is present in so many chronic conditions: diabetes, acute infections, asthma, cancers, heart disease. These are all conditions in which there's circulating levels of inflammation higher than typical. Now, because there's higher levels of inflammation, there's often a shutdown of vitamin D. And because of that, we've screened people who are sick and said, oh my goodness, people that are sick have low vitamin D. And like almost any way you could think of, any kind of sickness you can think of, they have lower vitamin D than healthy people would. And so for quite a while, there was a thought that, wow, low vitamin D causes everything to go wrong. And now everyone's totally rethinking that. Now the thought is, no, it probably didn't cause everything to go wrong. We still need vitamin D, and we should not be vitamin D deficient. But it wasn't so much that low vitamin D caused every illness under the sun. It's more so that every illness under the sun causes low vitamin D. It's an important difference, but it's a real difference. So imagine that like some aliens came to Earth and they saw a rainy day over London, and they thought that umbrellas cause rain. Like, well, no, they're there during the rain, but they didn't cause the rain. Kind of vice versa. And that's the thought process about vitamin D and all kinds of chronic illnesses. It's not so much the idea that low vitamin D causes illness. It's more so that sick people have different looking vitamin D levels than healthy people do. Here's a quick analogy to illustrate that point a bit further. For a while, it was thought that thin people were less healthy than people who were heavier because they had a higher risk of death when they were in the lower end of the body mass index. Then some researchers realized that a lot of the very thin people were smokers. And if you pulled them out, thin people were healthy. But if you left them in, they looked less healthy. So there's a lot of ways. Data is good, and we shouldn't give up and throw our hands in the air and just disregard it. But it always takes a few levels of thought to ferret out cause and effect, correlation and causation. And vitamin D is getting reevaluated right now. We think less and less about it being the cause and more so as being an effect. So very long-winded, I apologize, but I thought it's a good thing to know. I don't know data about vitamin D and K being specific for their sleep effects. And as far as time of day for absorption and general health, nothing specific that way. These are not things that have a circadian cycle for when they absorb or how they interact with the body's own circadian rhythms. So James, by default, most things I just doing in the morning with food. I mentioned the Daily Reset bundle that has both K2 and vitamin D. And by default, I suggest doing that in the morning with one's breakfast. So yeah, the timing is not an important distinction that way for sleep. If you are concerned, James, about sleep overall, yeah, come on, check out tomorrow's webinar. That's all we're going to be talking about. And I'm sure you'll probably a couple of things you have heard, but probably a couple of things you haven't. I would bet that you'll hear a few things that would be new for you. And here's one she asked not to post on screen, no problem. Hard to find bread with no salt. I found one from Queen Street Bakery, 50 milligrams. Don't know the source of salt. Would that be okay for reset or maintenance phase? Yeah, so Tamara, thank you for asking that. This is one that I wish I would have clarified better in the Thyroid Reset Diet book, but just, next edition will. I do my best. So that would be fine. Salt products, when they're in foods and they don't specify, oh, I'm sorry, I should back up. Hold on. So with bread, with bread, I wouldn't even think about the salt being the factor as it is just bread being the factor for iodine. There's so much data about bread having amounts of iodine that don't relate to the type of salt and don't even consistently relate to the use of iodized dough conditioners. I don't suggest commercial bread for the Thyroid Reset diet. You certainly can make breads at home. I've got some recipes in the book as well that make it pretty easy. But yeah, it's not even a matter of how much salt or which kind of salt is in the bread. Now, other products, condiments or whatnot, healthy condiments, in those cases, the threshold is 500 milligrams. So if there's fewer than 500 milligrams of salt per serving, it's It's okay even if they don't specify that they use a low iodine version of salt. And I've done some math on products and found that you won't likely be exposed to too much in that scenario. But bread, it's not the salt content, it's just the baking bread process. And I've had some even say, look, I know this bakery, they only use flour, water, salt. It's probably going to be fine. I don't know that 100% for certain, but if you know them, you trust them, that's totally your call. But I've seen odd assays of bread in which, yeah, one of them even separated bread based upon those that listed iodized dough conditioners and one that didn't, and it wasn't predictive of iodine content. And some batches had like 1,000 micrograms per slice, and some had like 30 in the same loaf. So there are ways iodine is used in commercial bread that doesn't really allow anyone to predict when it's there or not. So if you're in the reset phase, I would just avoid commercial bread products in general. And a related question I saw further down. Um, let's see. Yeah. Here was one that was related. So this was about uh, you said You said last time there aren't studies to show avoiding gluten had any effect on thyroid function. It gets confusing when others automatically say no gluten if you have Hashimoto's. Yeah, you're totally right. I'm actually going to be doing a presentation for the American College of Thyroidology on this topic in the coming weeks and do a literature update on that. Uh, Now, there's a lot of overlap between celiac disease and Hashimoto's. So a lot of people who have one are more likely to have the other. And I know that the numbers go both ways. I have the numbers top of mind for how likely someone is to have celiac if they have Hashimoto's. It's about 3%. 2.8 is the most accurate number I've seen. That does vary per demographic, ethnicity, or whatnot, but it's somewhere around there. The general population's risk is about 1%. So if you've got Hashimoto's, autoimmune thyroid disease, you've got about a 2.8 times increased risk of having celiac, but it's still about a 2.8% overall risk. Now, the question is, does changing your gluten intake change your likelihood of getting celiac disease? Does it change your thyroid function? Does it change your thyroid antibodies? So the likelihood of getting celiac disease, they've studied that. It does not. So when someone has celiac, I should back up. In populations that have been newly diagnosed with celiac, one paper watched to see how likely their compliance was to prevent them from developing thyroid disease. So they took people that had celiac, they tracked them for their first year, and there's some blood markers that can give a sense of whether they're avoiding wheat or not. And those that did not avoid wheat were compared with those who did avoid wheat. And they were watched to see how many developed thyroid disease from each group. There was no big differences. So getting thyroid disease isn't different for those that have celiac if they eat wheat or not. The other question is, what about people who don't have celiac? Does gluten intake cause thyroid disease for them? Um, that's not been explored. There was one paper that looked at whether thyroid antibodies changed in people that had celiac antibodies but weren't diagnosed as having celiac, which is kind of goofy. They basically had celiac, but no one told them they did. And in that group, avoiding gluten had no effect upon thyroid function. It did cause their antibodies to come down, which is totally a cool thing, but their thyroid function did not change. Now, it'd be very easy to dismiss this and say, well, why not avoid it anyway? If there's any possible risk, why not avoid it? And I've thought about this. There have been a few large studies looking at just the overall health of people who avoid gluten versus those who do not. And the overall health of those who avoid gluten is worse. There's just no two ways about that. They have higher rates of heart disease, they have higher rates of cardiovascular death, they have greater risk for diabetic markers, and they're more prone to gain weight. Now, there's a lot of possible reasons we could talk about for that, but one of the bigger studies went through a lot of possible reasons. It wasn't that they ate more junk food. It wasn't that they ate less fiber. It wasn't that they ate more sugar, but the one big difference was they lowered their whole grain intake. So possibly, had they done gluten-free whole grains, they would have been fine. But lowering one's whole grain intake raises the risk for cardiovascular death. And I'm thinking about the big picture. So if going gluten-free was totally harmless, or if it had other general health benefits, I'd be more apt to line up and say, yeah, give it a try. Why not? Some people feel better from that. But it doesn't. It has worse outcomes. Now, how could it possibly help thyroid for some people? Well, the biggest two sources of iodine that have increased in the last few decades are dairy and processed grain products. And I've done a lot of dietary analysis to show that those who go gluten free, in terms of thyroid function, they lower their iodine. So that's good, but you can do that while you're eating a broad range of healthy whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, fruits and veggies, animal proteins. You can do that with a good comprehensive diet. So those are my thoughts about that. So I think I saw some follow-up comments here from Kelly that I asked earlier. Great, thank you, Kelly. She takes Unithroid, which is a T4 only medication. She did take the medicine before testing. TSH is 2.01. Free T3 was the one, not at normal range at 2.5. Okay, 88 micrograms. Sorry. Yeah. So Kelly, so simple thing, you would be at a euthyroid state. You're neither hyper nor hypo. 2.5 is not an unusual free T3 reading. It can be skewed soon after medication. That's more common for natural thyroid or combinations that include cytomel, but it can happen for any blend too. So all things together, those scores uh, to really be fussy, there are different categories of people per age, pregnancy, gender, whatnot. But overall, that's about as high as you'd want your TSH. If it were much higher, it could point to you being underactive or undertreated. But otherwise, no, the T3 at 2.5 is not unusual in the full context of your findings. So yeah, you're not hyper because of that. Hope that was helpful. Okay. Let me grab a couple more. Um, Here was one. Can I take supplements within an hour of thyroid meds? Doc wants me to take T3 3 times a day. Last dose before bed when I'm taking magnesium, zinc, etc. So, so great question. And here's something I've said before too. Your friends will answer your questions. Your real friends will question your questions. They'll dig deeper into your question than you even thought to ask. So the short answer is usually, depends upon the type of things. The items you mentioned, the magnesium, zinc, those two are not an issue within an hour. Et cetera is a big category, and some things that fall under et cetera can be an issue within many hours. So water-soluble calcium, like calcium citrate, I put that in the daily reset bundle, is fine an hour after thyroid meds. Some people, some versions of calcium can throw things off even 4 to 6 hours later. So that's difficult. Now let's go back. So the merits of taking T3 multiple times per day. So there's the T3 absorption and the excretion. And how quickly it comes into your bloodstream is the absorption pharmacokinetics. And there is a peak absorption that starts about 2 hours after a dose, like we were talking about with Kelly and her medication timing, and it drops off by about 12 hours. But there's still blood levels higher even 30 hours after a dose. So the excretion of T3 is variable. It's somewhere between like 22 and 40 hours. Your body adjusts that as it needs to. Now, a lot of doctors have heard about T3 absorption, and they've then thought we need to take T3 many times a day because it absorbs faster. But pharmacokinetics and pharmacology 101 teaches us that the frequency of a medication should not be tied to its absorption, it's tied to its excretion. You might have heard about a half-life before. So a half-life is how long it takes to get half of a dose of medicine out of your body, not into your body. And somewhere around 5 half-lives is about how often you'd have to take a medicine to maintain steady levels. So T3, the half-life being around 22 to 30 hours, you can do fine on once daily dosing. That doesn't mean your blood levels are identical all throughout the day. But the other thought about T3 is that healthy people that are not on thyroid medication, they don't have T3 levels that are flat all throughout the day. They never do. T3, T4, TSH, these are all circadian hormones. So, two reasons I suggest once daily dosing, one of which is it mimics thyroid function in healthy people. The other one is that it fits the requirements based upon T3 excretion and the half-life. And that's just how we recommend medication frequency is based upon the excretion, not the absorption. So those are some thoughts there. I do know good doctors that will strategically use T3 a few times a day short term for some people, but they're extremely advanced. They've got some good reasons for doing so, and it's really the exception. So 3 times a day, the other big problem is you're right. That's pretty tough to time with life and food and whatnot. That's not realistic or practical. So in most cases, I do recommend against taking it multiple times a day. You're not fitting what your body would do in a state of good health. And if you're not making your thyroid hormones perfectly by yourself and you're taking them, you'd want to take them in a way that replicates what your body would do when it's working well. And that's really having a circadian cycle. The blood levels are higher and they work their way down, but they don't go away. It's not gone. And healthy people, their T3 levels are lower in the evening and at night. So we want to really replicate that as much as possible. So, yeah, good question. I will watch for follow up ones you might have as well. And I'm also going to look for some just related questions to comments that I made and try to focus on those for the remainder of this. So here's a couple quick ones. Should grains and beans be soaked? You're welcome to. The thought there was an idea that phytates in grains and beans caused health problems, and we had to soak them to make them go away, or that lectins were big issues in them. Now, grains and beans are foods that we cook, right? So we cook them, and we want to cook them. If we don't, like red kidney beans, if we ate a cup of those raw, that can be fatal. But is that a real problem? Last time that happened was in the 1940s. There have been times where people have undercooked beans, gotten sick from that. You don't do that. You got to cook your food. You also want to make sure that you're handling food that's not expired, or you got to manage when you're handling raw meat. There's basic stuff we got to do, and we've got to cook our beans. That's part of just basic cooking and basic home economics, I guess. But as far as having to eliminate every bit of phytates and phytic acid, no, it's not only is it not harmful, there's strong evidence that dietary exposure to phytic acid lowers our cancer risk and improves our digestive health. So these are many of the reasons why those foods are good for us. So you're welcome to soak them. Some prefer that for culinary reasons, or they feel they digest them better. No drawback at all. But there's no health reason you've got to worry about soaking them or treating them like they're dangerous in some way. And a related one, should insulin-resistant people completely stay away from grains to lose weight? So this is a great question, and I don't want to take too long on this answer. I could probably go for a long time if I got too wound up on this one. So insulin resistance is not a disease, it's an adaptation. When the body has more fuel than it needs, it wants your fuel not to go in your cells. If it did, it would kill your mitochondria. You put so much gas in the engine, it would shut down. So we resist insulin, and insulin is something that coaxes fuel into the cells. So insulin resistance is a protective mechanism. Now, if our diet has too much food and there's a lot of carbohydrate, we will get insulin resistance. We'll get high insulin levels and high glucose eventually. If we were to eat the exact same amount of food, but swap out fat for carbohydrate, our insulin could go down. However, our triglycerides and our inflammatory markers would go up. We would become lipid resistant. This is the same problem. It's just too much fuel, and there's different kinds of fuel that are left in circulation. So insulin resistance, it's not a disease of carbohydrate, it's a disease of excess. And if one were on a ketogenic diet or a high-fat diet and there was too much food, insulin might be low, but you'd still gain weight and still have prediabetes and still other health complications. A funny thought experiment, take a look at the continent of Asia. They've been on a rice-based diet for quite a while, and they've had the lower body mass index scores. So, and this has been studied so much in terms of diets and macronutrient ratios, low fat, low carb. It's your total food intake. And the other question is just lowering food long-term an effective way to lose weight? And the metabolism reset diet is my more detailed answer to all of that. I don't think it is. I think that weight loss should be a brief thing. You do it for a couple of weeks. You got a very specific strategy. You get in and get out. You don't live that way. It's not healthy. And I also argue that you need some good carbohydrate. You need quality proteins, because what's happening is there's triglycerides building up inside your liver. And that's what makes weight loss difficult. When this is bad enough, it may get diagnosed as fatty liver disease. It's often not, but nearly anyone who struggles with a few pounds has excess triglycerides in their liver. So the metabolism reset diet is how to go about reversing that. But it's something that you will see you will see things change if you cut out all carbohydrate, but you won't see things improve. You won't see things really get better. You just see a different set of abnormalities in the blood work. So yeah, good question. And that was a brief answer. I did my best not to get on too big of a soapbox, but yeah. Here's another one. So it's kind of related to a topic I've mentioned not too long ago. Your thoughts on taking a supplement that contains bovine liver, kidney, pancreas, and heart, currently low in ferritin and digestive enzymes. So iron overall, yeah, please do take a peek. I've written some very detailed posts about iron. So liver supplements, they have iron. However, if you run the math on how much iron you get per capsule, it's not worthwhile. It's just far too little to be useful. La Familia, take a peek at our upcoming webinar series. There's one tomorrow on sleep. There's one I'm doing on iron. I don't know when, it's in a couple weeks, but there's a new mixture called Easy Iron. And I'm really excited about this one, especially. There's been no iron supplements like this ever, really. And I can't think of why, but this will be better absorbed, better tolerated. So, liver ends up being typically about 1 to 3 milligrams of iron per capsule. That won't bother your stomach, but it won't budge your ferritin. It's not enough to make any difference whatsoever. That's not to say liver can't be part of a healthy diet. And I'm not saying liver capsules are dangerous, but they're just far too low potency to be helpful. So, yeah, take a peek at that. Um, Let me get a couple more related ones here, too. Okay, Joy, here's for you. 62 next month, have trouble sleeping most nights. TSH, T3, and T4 are normal. Have third issues going to stray whisker popping up. Joy, come on and join us tomorrow night. I popped the link up earlier, Joy, for the webinar event, and it's all going to be about sleep. So I'll save the ideas for that. But yeah, come on, you should get some enjoyment out of that. Um, Lily, here's a good one. In your supplements, I couldn't see specifically for hair loss. Lily, yeah, good question. I put a lot of thought into that. In That's something that I do have formulated, and there's a couple more items that I've got coming out in the near term. However, I find that in most cases, hair loss is going to be secondary to something else, especially iron. I think iron is by far the most common culprit for controllable hair loss. Now, I should back up. There's telogen effluvium, which is more even, diffuse hair loss among women, especially. And there's androgenetic alopecia. So, androgenetic alopecia is common with PCOS or otherwise women that have high androgens. So, high testosterone, high DHEA, high DHT. Now, telogen effluvium is most responsive to iron and protein. So, yeah, back to the comments about easy iron. In terms of androgenetic alopecia, there is something we have in the pipeline we're working out right now for our next batch of new items. There's about 4 or 5 more that I'll make in this next year, and that'll pretty much round things out. But one will be an item that will be managing a great deal of androgenetic alopecia and some other perimenopausal issues. There are some specific hair loss items, and I've got a good one on our shopping cart. And I didn't replace that one because it is a good mixture. So if you go into the drchristiansen.com store, there is a good hair loss blend there, hair, skin, and nails. But even before then, I would ask you to think through your iron metabolism. If that is below ideal, you'll get more bang for your buck on helping your iron come back up all the way. If you've not seen it, there's a really detailed post I have about iron. I'm going to drop that link up here if anyone's not come across it just yet. Um, Actually, I find one about hair that's even more specific to your question. And the hair one does refer back to the iron post. So here's a super detailed one. With this post, you can easily identify what type of hair loss it would be. And I'll talk about some of the main solutions for that. So yeah, check that out. And I think you might find that useful. Yeah, so follow-up questions I'm looking at. Just one about the iron with La Familia. Thinking the other vitamins like vitamin A, copper, selenium would also be beneficial. They wouldn't change your ferritin. They're good things to have in supplementation, but they won't change ferritin levels. Overall, I encourage the Daily Reset bundle as a foundation, and then easy iron for those that are low in ferritin. Let's see. Follow-up questions. Let's see. Dr. C, do you know anything about how much iodine is in red marine algae supplements? How much? I have seen some assays suggesting they were high, but I've seen the assays variable. So the amount that's often in the supplements is rather small. There's often just a few 100 milligrams of red marine algae. Uh, I You're probably going to be looking at between about like 10 to 20 micrograms. So probably somewhere in that range, but it's not something I personally supplement with. Kind of a thought process about supplements too is that I think about things that are really specific. So you need the foundational micronutrients, right? And then if there's things that are targeting a specific concern, like if you're lowering your antibodies or building up your iron or whatever, but there's countless things like the red algae. Maybe it's a rich source of astaxanthin. Maybe it's something that has anti-inflammatory properties. There's tons of things that might be good in certain ways, and they're not they're individually bad. But the difficulty is if the rule you use is you take things that might be good in some way, you take a lot of stuff. You take too much stuff because there's countless items that could fall in under that rule. So that's my thought process. I see people that take 20, 30, 40, 50 supplements and it damages their liver. And no one of those things you would think would do it, but the huge group together can. So nothing bad about that. But I would just push back and say, maybe there is a specific goal that I'm not aware of that's useful for? Totally cool. And maybe it's part of a short, reasonable list. But there are some who would take things because they sound like they might be a good idea, just kind of vaguely in general. And I would just encourage you to be specific and targeted about why you would use something, how long you'd use it, what you're watching for specifically. So I don't like vague general stuff. Too much can be an issue. So here's a topic I've covered a few times before: LabCorp urinary iodine to creatinine ratio test. Do you happen to know why LabCorp results show total iodine 24 and then actual ratio? Yeah, so they report that way, even if it's not a 24-hour urine test. That's not a logical answer, but that's how their policy works. So even on a spot sample, they report it as a 24-hour sample. The deeper question is it important to test? So aesthetic love, if you'd like to mention why you were testing and give you feedback on that. If you've been low iodine and things didn't help, it may be worth checking to see if you're, one, still getting some iodine coming in, or two, you haven't had time to detox all the way from iodine. If you'd want to mention what your thought was going into the testing, I'm happy to give you more detailed feedback on what that would be. And even if you want to put your number up, I'll tell you what that number would mean and give you more context about that. Let's see. So I'm just looking. There's a lot of, okay, so Joy. The links, yeah, they should be live. I thought the links would be visible on YouTube. If not, they will be visible on Facebook, I know, and I'll get them up afterward as well. Maritza, your hyperthyroid support contains quercetin. I am taking quercetin already, 500 milligrams. How much is too much quercetin? The combination would not be harmful for you, 500 plus that. But kind of what I was saying about just extra stuff, if the extra one by itself wasn't needed for some other reason, you could just drop it and use the hyperthyroid support by itself and streamline things a little bit. So iodine, tested because I heard you talk about it. My number was 48. My son's was at 38. So the iodine, you would think that your levels would predict your likelihood of getting thyroid disease or not, or getting better by reducing iodine. It doesn't. So there's really no way that it helps you know what to do differently. If you have thyroid disease, you're better off going on a low iodine diet. If you've been on one for 3 months and nothing improved for you, it may be worth testing iodine then in that case. So it doesn't really say your nutritional status of iodine, but it does say how your body's excreting it, how it's coming out of your system. So it doesn't say how much you're getting, do you have too much or too little, but it does say how you're eliminating it. And if there's a whole lot coming out and you're not consuming any, maybe you had a whopping dose that you're still clearing, or maybe you are still consuming some, but that's only useful to answer those two questions. It can't say exactly you need to eat more, eat less. But yeah, if you've had thyroid disease or prone to it, you're better off on a lower iodine diet. That doesn't mean that you want zero. It doesn't mean iodine is bad. So I wrote the Thyroid Reset diet really with those ideas in mind. This will put someone at a reasonable, safe, healthy range. So yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, want to see if we're doing your diet right. So if you were already in a low iodine diet, those would be therapeutic levels of urinary iodine to creatinine ratios. You were really at a therapeutic target. So kudos and good job. And with that, you can expect that the extent to which iodine was affecting your thyroid, that will be reversing over the coming months. So yeah, the target is really below 100 micrograms of iodine per gram of creatinine. That's how they should report that, as micrograms per gram. And yeah, to be in the 30s and 40s, that's a therapeutic level, and it's not a low bad level. That's just fine. It was all working well for you then. All right. So here's another good one from Aisha. I've seen it here before. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I know I've struggled with that before, and I'm sorry. I'm in remission for Graves' disease. Is it okay to still take your hypothyroidism supplements to maintain my results? That's a good reason to do so, to make you less likely to have some recurrence. And if you're in remission, that's totally cool. This is something that's surprising for people, but Graves' disease, even though it can be more dangerous in the short term than Hashimoto's, there is a higher rate of remission. And kudos to you for being able to achieve that. But yeah, that's a great way to cut your risk for recurrence. Um, one or two more. Okay, so here's a great one. I'm taking bioidentical hormones with 5 days off every month. So when is it best to test for thyroid hormones? Thank you very much. So, yeah, so obviously you've been listening to what I've been saying about menstrual cycles. So women with menstrual cycles have different test results at different times of the month. When you're taking hormones and you're skipping a few days, the change is not as dramatic. You would want to really test somewhere in the middle of those days you're taking it. So I'm going to make up some numbers. Let's say that days 1 through 5 are the days you don't take your hormones, and then days 6 through 30 are the days you take them. Well, I would go around like day 18, which is about in the middle of those days when you're taking it. You wouldn't have to be on day 18. I wouldn't stress about that, but somewhere within a week of day 18. The rationale is that estrogen changes thyroid binding globulin. And for a cycling woman, the large rise and fall of estrogen can give her very different readings mid-cycle than on the ends of her cycle. When you're on HRT and mostly on, it's more constant, the difference is not as great, but you'll get the most meaningful results during the time in which you're on your hormones. So somewhere around the middle of that, and you got a fair amount of leeway. So not too worried. Another thought, Maritza, if your dosage of hormones changes, your thyroid needs might well change. As a general rule, the more estrogen, the more thyroid. So estrogen makes your body a little more thyroid resistant. And then vice versa is very important to be aware of too. If there's a time where you need less hormone, or there's a time in which you stop them altogether, you'll probably need less thyroid treatment if you're on thyroid treatment. So just anticipate that. It's better to expect that than to be surprised about it. Um, let's see. Let me try to get one more here, and then I'll wrap it up for this evening. And again, tomorrow we're going to talk all about sleep. This is from Daily Netizen with us on YouTube. I'm suffering from hypopituitarism. Is ashwagandha good for me? Is vitamin B a good for me? I take P5P. Is it a good form of B6? So yeah, hypopituitarism. So ashwagandha, excuse me, the seasonal allergies. I was just outside a bunch, doing some work in the dirt. So ashwagandha has had a few animal studies on its effects on thyroid function. Nothing big, good, or bad. It's a general safe tonic. The funny thing is that the Sanskrit name means smells like a horse. And it's Withania somnifera is the actual plant. And it is a Solanaceae family plant. So it's a nightshade. So some people are afraid of it for that reason. No need to be. It's a very gentle tonic plant. It wouldn't have any effects upon hypopituitarism, good or bad. I would just push back daily. Hypopituitarism, very real medical condition, most common secondary to adenomas. So the pituitary can grow lumps. Those lumps can squeeze it. They can squeeze it to where it can't work properly. So it can come from also other things, trauma, radiation, surgeries or whatnot, or just idiopathic. But yeah, certainly a known medical phenomena. Now, I say that because I see a lot of doctors that aren't really endocrinologists that will diagnose someone as having hypopituitarism when they do not. And the most common scenario I'll see is someone who's on a high dose of thyroid medication and their T3 and T4 levels are normal, maybe even low normal, maybe even low, and their TSH gets low. And the doctor says, oh, you have hypopituitarism. It's usually not the case. It's usually a simple adaptation to too much thyroid hormone. So I don't know if that's the case for you or not, or if you've got real hypopituitarism, but ashwagandha wouldn't affect hypopituitarism. Now, Vitamin B6 is something to where I do encourage P5P instead of B6, not so much in addition to B6. Those with or prone to thyroid disease have very high rates of neurologic complications from B6. Numbness, tingling, fatigue, anxiety. It's very common from pyridoxal hydrochloride. So P5P does all the things B6 does, but it's safer. And so I do encourage avoiding B6. And I saw another follow-up question: can I get this product in the UK? For sure. And here's a really cool trick. This is a company that we've learned about from you all. Some of you told me about this. It's called Reship. I'm going to put this link up here for my friends on YouTube and Facebook. This is reship.com. And basically, Daily Netizen, you would simply get an account with Reship. They give you a US address. And once you have that, you can order anything you would want, which would be sent to that address. They would then reship to you in the UK. And my understanding is their service is prompt, the rates are quite reasonable, and it's not a difficult thing. So yeah, you just get an account with them. They give you a US address you can use with your name, and you order what you want, which is sent to that address. So that's useful for supplements or anything else you'd rather have shipped at less cost or better availability for outside the country. And they ship outside pretty much the whole world is my understanding. And I saw your follow-up comment. It was diagnosed by endocrinologist after blood test MRI. Thank you for telling me that. That's a very real phenomenon. That is hypopituitarism. Now, the significance of that is all of your glands can be less active than they would be otherwise. So the pituitary is telling your thyroid, your adrenals, testicles, or ovaries, all of your glands to make hormone. If the pituitary is underactive, it's generally underactive across the board, meaning all those glands are underactivated. So if it's significant enough, some can need replacement therapy for everything, and they need thyroid, adrenal, gonadal hormones. Some also need some growth hormone to compensate for that. But it's an extensive thing that, if very well managed, people can do well from. But yeah, it does take some thorough management and follow up on. And ashwagandha, well, it's not harmful. There's no real specific benefit for you for that condition. Yeah. Okay. Yep, you are welcome. Okay, so here's a related one. I've got to follow up on that too. Okay, so this was about the Lily and the hair loss mentioned before. Started having hair loss last year. Doctor said that other doctor's prescription of thyroid was too much for me. I weigh 46 kilograms, height. In the beginning, helped lower TSH from 25 to 2.3. Now they lowered my dose to 120. Leave my hair is growing a little. I still think I need some supplement to help hair regrow. Yeah, Lily, what I would think about there is really the daily reset bundle, and think about your iron status. If you are on the low side, even if you're below 100 for ferritin, that can be part of the regrowth being delayed. Thyroid hormones should keep your levels stable. If you're way out of range, that by itself can cause hair loss, whether there's too much or too little. So when your TSH was 25, that could have been a culprit for hair loss as much as anything. And it can also be something that's very delayed. So if something does trigger hair loss, the hair loss may show up like 3, 6, or 9 months later. And then also vice versa. When you do the things that help hair loss, those benefits might take some time to show up. But please take a peek at that post I wrote, Lily. It was so detailed about solutions for hair loss, just like you're describing. What you're talking about in a situation like that, I would focus on the telogen effluvium section of that article. But all that advice can be very specific for you and hopefully quite useful. So yeah, you're welcome. I'm seeing some thank yous rolling in. You're welcome, you guys, and good to see everyone. And yeah, one more related question. I get OCD about some of these. Does infrared sauna help to detox iodine? Short version is no, it doesn't. Iodine comes out almost exclusively through the urine. A tiny bit comes out through our sweat, but more sweat doesn't mean more iodine loss. The electrolyte I use after the infrared says chloride and sodium from Himalayan salt. Does that mean it has iodine? Thank you very much. It does. Himalayan salt is actually higher in iodine than iodine fortified salt is. So electrolyte solutions, The things you lose are going to be sodium and potassium. Chloride, magnesium, calcium, they're there as well, but normal amounts compensate for them. So it's really sodium, potassium, they're the big ones. Sodium, no trick how to get that. You can get sodium quite readily. Potassium, no trick on that. Coconut water is a very easy, handy thing. V8 juice, any fruit or vegetable you could shake a stick at is high in potassium. So one doesn't really need exotic things for that. And for some reason, a lot of electrolyte supplements have added iodine. So yeah, I don't think they're necessary per se. Saunas can be a great thing for detox though. They're really nice. Iodine won't come out, but a lot of other things will. But yeah, hydrate, salt your next meal a little bit more and then have some coconut water or something. All right, have a good evening, and I'll see some of you all tomorrow night. We'll go deep into sleep. I'm excited to have this conversation with you all. All right, take good care.